Hey everyone, how's everyone doing today? I'm Brian, that handsome devil down there is,
Leonard, nice to meet you guys.
and this is the Up for Grip show. Alright, how's everyone doing today? And our special guest today is Stephanie Bennett. How you doing, Stephanie?
Hi there, everybody. I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing good, and this is actually our first time doing a group chat on Skype before. I know other people have used like Zoom and stuff like that, so I think this ought to be interesting because this is a first for me, so
This is pretty historical, so
he's pretty excited. He was anticipating this all week too, so this ought to be
yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Uh,
it was.
So, Stephanie, we wanted to invite you on to kind of talk about technology because it seems like that's something you specialize in terms of academic works, and I guess you've written some other books too, and we're going to get into that just a little bit. So, the way the format here is going to work is I'll start off by asking a question, and then Lenny over here will ask his question, and then it'll just go back and forth. And so we might figure some along the way, but we did send you some. So, I
That's
guess
fun.
I guess you ready?
Sounds good.
All right, so I'll start off here. Uh, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Stephanie Bennett?
Who is Stephanie Bennett? Well, I always try to say to folks, my bio is not my identity. You know, I do an awful lot of things. I wear many, many hats. I have fulfilled many different roles in media and communication throughout my life. And they're all wonderful things that I do, but they're not actually who I am. And I am very simply, I'm a woman who is, I consider myself just a child of God. I'm not terribly complicated. I say, I'm not complicated, just love me.
That's very good. No, that's we kind of poked around of some of the stuff that you have written in the past, and to be frank with you, I haven't read the full thing, like some of the articles that you made, but I know you made Endangered Habitat, and you made social media, the problem of pace. So those things kind of like spark out to us, and from that, just with the technology and the ways we're living now today, just from all that's going on and just what you've kind of been observing, do you think technology has taken away our natural human senses?
Yeah, I don't think anything can take away our natural human senses, our sense of smell and sight and hearing, etc. However, we can numb them, right? And there's some chemical substances and physical substances that numb our senses, right? And then in a similar way, there's technological substances, if you want to call them that, that numb our senses. I think as a professor, when I am lecturing and if it's not terribly engaging, or I know that someone hasn't had a good night's sleep the night before, I start to see like eyes glaze over, right?
Yeah.
And thankfully I don't see that a lot because I really believe in discussion and the Socratic method. So there's not a whole lot of lecture. There's much more discussion and unpacking texts and ideas together. But that whole idea of like, if you've been there where your eyes glaze over, if you're listening to, and even if it's something you want to listen to, if you're tired, your eyes just kind of glaze over.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Same kind of thing. We get that same kind of numbness if we're scrolling for hours and hours. There's kind of like eyes glazed over. Our sense of being in tune and with others kind of gets numb. So yeah, it does. I do believe technology has the as one of my long gone mentors says, technology giveth and technology taketh away. Technology gives us so much and is such a blessing in many ways, but very easily, if we let it, it just steals away our time and our attention and our focus.
Yeah, there's like a little pros and cons to it. I mean, honestly, I'm not gonna lie. It feels like it makes me like a zombie sometimes when I'm scrolling for almost like literally for 5 minutes. Seriously. So,
I get that. Yeah.
I'm also
I
guilty
hear
of it too.
Yeah. I hear that from my students all the time. And the interesting thing is it's not just 18 and 20-year-olds, it's people my age too, middle-aged people, elderly people. If you just don't engage with another person, but you're just, engaging with the screen, it's not really engaging. It'll affect you the same way. In communication study, we call that, much has been written about that now. It's called screen fatigue. I don't know if you've heard of that, or Zoom fatigue.
think I've heard it through the grapevine before. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something along those lines, yeah. It might have been like termed something else, but it seems like there's words you can sort of use that are like interchangeable, so to speak. But in terms of my question, and this kind of ties in with maybe a little bit of what Elon Musk is doing with Twitter. I guess, what can you tell us about technology and why is it having such negative impacts on human life?
Okay, well, that is a vast question, and I could sit here with you for 3 hours and we still wouldn't finish it. We're not going to sit here for 3 hours, right? But the problem with technology is just part of our life ever since the beginning of civilization. We don't normally think of things like fire as a technology, but it is. It's something that mediated the difference between human life and reality and what they have to deal with, storms and so on. We usually don't think of a pen or a book as a technology, but it is. It comes forth from a technology. We're fantastic at that, we human beings, at creating and inventing. And in so many ways, so many of the things that we've invented have elongated our lives, have blessed our lives, have helped us be healthy when we're sick, But the problem now is, and technology always changes everything. This is nothing new in the 21st century. It's not like all of a sudden because of new media, social media, and the internet, everything is different than it was. No, we've always had technological change is ecological. That means it doesn't just add something to our lives. It changes everything. Mm-hmm. And so what we're reckoning with now, and I should say not reckoning with really well as a people, is the fact that the changes that are happening make new demands on us. The changes that are happening, like in whether we write a paper or we go on TV or we turn on YouTube or whatever we do, we're benefiting from those things, but we're not reckoning with the fact that there are demands made of us, right? So what I mean by that is, if we want to flourish as human beings, we have to reckon with things that are not, that are hurting us. So let me give you an example. The loneliness quotient in the country is off the roof. It's like all of the studies that are being done this last 3 years, instead of people feeling more connected to others, they're feeling more and more isolated. And this was even before COVID, right? And so why is this happening? Well, it's certainly negative. Why is it happening? It's happening because we think we don't have media literacy. We think just because it's there, just because there's Facebook and Twitter and all of these, and TikTok and all of these other social media, that they've got to be, because they're fun or they're interesting, it's got to be good for us. We don't think about what we need to change so that it doesn't gobble us up in a sense, And so part of the issue is not technology per se, but it's the way that we think about technology. We just think it's neutral, whatever. It's just how we use it. It's not neutral. The technology, technologies have a bias, and so let me give you an example. For Twitter, how many characters are allowed in Twitter? There's only a certain amount. You can only get like little sound bites, right? Mm-hmm. So that bias is toward the jocular, mocking kind of wittyisms, not real measured conversation. So if you want to conduct, let's say, a love relationship via Twitter, most of us would say, wow, that's crazy. How can you do that? Right? Because you can't just relate to someone and expect your relationship to grow more intimate just by throwing, witticisms at each other. You need real conversation. Yet somehow our country, and we are in this last 10 years, just thinking, these technologies, they don't really do anything. It's the way we use them. No, we need to reckon with the fact they're doing something, and we need to be agents. We need to have agency and take, like my mother used to say, take the bull by the horns and treat each other right. Remember that face-to-face conversation is important. Remember that real relationships take talking and conversation and caring, not just throwing witticisms and barbs at each other. I don't know if that.
No, that totally makes sense, because that kind of actually answers the first question that I said. Like, has it like took away some of the human senses? I mean, you're right that there are human senses that we naturally have just automatically, but for the communication and the loneliness, like that's starting to become more of a sense that is becoming higher, instead of that joy and happiness that we used to feel, just like how back in the old days. Because how I kind of like I'm getting a little bit off script here, but like my grandma and Peppa, I mean, now they're passed away, but they used to show like what back in the old days, how it used to be. Not saying that humans weren't perfect back then either, but they had a different type of mentality than we do now,
Right.
especially because technology was a little bit weaker compared to now and stuff, and it's been more natural to us. But that kind of actually piggies back off of what I'm going to go to next, is that, do you think technology has affected the dating world? And I think you kind of answered that a little bit. So.
Well, it certainly has. And I would say in a positive and negative way. I have quite a few students and older people who have told me they found their mate online and they've gotten married and it's worked out really well. So there's that kind of positivity there. But I kind of see it as a little bit more negative, because it seems, and this is where that bias comes in again, if you think you're going to find your mate just by swiping left, swiping left, swiping left, what are you looking for? You're looking at the visage, you're looking at how she or he is dressed, you're looking at how they present themselves in one quick little photo or video snap, right? You're not getting at all anywhere near the heart of the person, who that person is, and so you're going to miss all kinds of people. You're going to miss all kinds of people that could be wonderful mates, wonderful partners, And the other thing that it does is it kind of acculturates the young and the dating into the idea that a person is a product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean by that? That a person is an object or a thing. Because there's this kind of anonymity there. They don't know that you're passing them over, right? And, you can just treat them like pages in a book, and they're, but it kind of, I want to get a little bit into this idea of neuroplasticity, because what happens with these media, and in the dating situation, it's a very good example that you're bringing up, is it changes our neural structure. So 20 years ago, doctors didn't really know there was such thing as neuroplasticity. Maybe 25 years ago, they were just starting to study it. The thinking was, when I was coming up in high school and college, is that the brain is a black box, basically. You're born with a certain amount of intelligence, a certain amount of mass, and that's what you have for the rest of your life. You can add knowledge to it, but that's what you have. But now it's clear that our neural systems are constantly changing. And that's good and bad, because if our neurotransmitters can change, the more we introduce a positive habit over and over and over again, a new neural transmitter is embedded there in that brain. And we have something new, right? But the less we do something that's important, the more it fades from our memory. And so that's why this neuroplasticity can be, bad and good. I bring that up because the more we think about a woman being an object or a man being an object, do I like his hair? Do I like his physique? Does she have a good figure? Does she have a good smile? The more we think about those things that are natural to think about, but we think about them separated from a conversation, the more we get to think of people as these remote things that don't have feelings. And that is hurting us, because the empathy is so important for a culture to be functioning, for a society to function in a civilized way. We need empathy. We need to understand feelings and each other.
Right. And just to piggyback off of that, I mean, I'm not asking another question. I know that's Brian's part, but just to add on that, and don't quote me, but I think there's been studies, I think, with women and also men, they're going to be 52% likely to be more single than it was in the past. You know what I mean? So, like, meaning there's going to be more girls being single, more boys being single, because of just this, what you're just saying, this idea of like, I like their physique, but I don't know their heart. And it seems like a lot of people are closed now these days because of the technology like that, because they think they have a lot of opportunities, but when the opportunity strikes, they don't take it.
Right,
So,
because they're looking for perfection.
right, and that's the problem. There's no perfection in a human.
No perfection. And even if you find someone that, according to you, looks perfect online, what are they like? What do they care about? What's their personality? What are their values? What's their character? And so we end up what's the word I'm looking for? We kind of throw ourselves into this false consciousness that a relationship is going to be like a Disney-fied relationship, like, oh, this wonderful princess or prince shall come. And that's not what love is about. And that's why people are lonely, because they can't, you need to be open, and you need to find someone open who wants to care about another person instead of looking for self-gratification.
Right.
I was thinking some funny jokes there, to be honest, but even going back to the the old Disney kind of shows to go like with the Aladdin on the magic carpet flying off through the moonlight there. That'd be that thing.
Right.
I think Disney blinded a lot of my generation, Brian and I's generation, because they're looking at that perfect world. And I mean, there's relationships that lasted 66 plus years without the. That's what I'm trying to get at. So I feel like it's a little bit weaker now. So
yeah, our elders, I think it's like I was always taught to listen to my elders. None of us really want to, right? But I mean, we're taught to listen to our elders, and they have wisdom. They have a lot of wisdom. And now I think because the technology has advanced so quickly, and a lot of the elderly folks have a really hard time with it, it seems like the young, I don't know, are you Generation Z?
Millennials, so I think we might be the generation before the Gen Z, I think.
It was
Gen X?
I actually looked at it last night. It was I think it was 81 to 96 was a millennial, and I think it was Gen Z, I think, was after that.
Right, Gen Z, but you guys aren't Gen Z. You're X. You're X. You're not 40.
No. Why?
We're millennial. We're millennial. I'm millennial,
right,
at least.
Why?
So,
I know my alphabet.
I would tell people, back off from my millennials. I love my millennials. They're getting the bad rap. They're doing the best they can. Let me tell you something. The Zs, I don't know what to say about the Gen Zs yet, because the Gen Zs are the ones I've noticed that, like, they're 19 and they're like, and not all 19-year-olds, because it's terrible to stereotype, and I don't want anybody stereotyping me either, but it's like a lot of times the Gen Zs like want to go like, oh, the older people, what do they know? They don't even know how to use a mouse properly. They don't even know what TikTok is or whatever. And it's like they think they can find everything there is to be found in Google, And I know my millennials don't believe that. They might use the technology really well, but know that there's some wisdom of the elders.
Yeah, and I think I'll get to another question later on after that, but yeah.
But I guess I'll jump into it now. But is this some of the stuff you talk about at some of the conferences and forums you go to, Steph?
Oh, yes, Brian. Yes, we do. In fact, I was in New Orleans last week before I got sick. I was in New Orleans speaking at a conference on this stuff. The week before, I was in Gainesville speaking about it. There's much that needs to be said here and done here, and I think people are just starting to realize that grabbing a hold of the technology involves much, much more than just getting good at using it. It involves understanding how to use it with wisdom, how to use it in a way that is wise and worthwhile and not to our detriment. Some of the conferences, I mean, you referenced one of my articles about pace. Yeah, I think that we need to learn as a generation, and I say that widely because I know I'm quite a bit older than you guys, but as a generation that is alive today, we need to learn how to stop being so stinking fascinated with technology, to stop for a minute and carry with us the gifts from the 20th century and the 19th century and the 18th century. There's gifts, there's things that have brought civilization along. And one of them we are so bad at right now, and that's pace. And we've got to learn how to slow down. We've got to learn how to stop elevating multitasking like it's the most important value in the world to multitask. Because when we multitask, we're not focusing on the thing that we need to be focused on. It's like if you're looking at your phone when you're driving, you're multitasking. And we think, oh, we can do that. I can do that. Back and forth, back and forth. No, continued partial attention is something that is out there in the research that says if you're thinking about and trying to do more than one thing at one time, you're not really doing anything more than partially. And we need focus. We need to slow down. Yeah, those are the kinds of things I'm talking about at the conferences and in my books.
Yeah.
I was just going to add just one more thing in. Hold on, Lenny.
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, you talked a good bit there, too, so I think I'm going to have to interject now. But
No, go ahead.
I would say maybe not texting and driving, though, too, because that's a very bad habit. I think people need to really break out of that, too. But I know I think it kind of ties into your article. You talked about the endangered habitat of silence, for instance. But sometimes if I'm not really doing, like, anything, if I'm just standing around, because sometimes I tend to work like 2 jobs, and there's sometimes where the pace is real slow, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Not a whole lot of a crowd coming in. For some reason, I'm like, all right, I'll just check my phone, see what's going on, just to pass the time, so to speak. So, and it's, you go on YouTube, and sometimes I go on Facebook. So, and I think this also ties into Lenny's question too. But I guess, Lenny, did you have one about Facebook too?
No, I don't have anything specific with Facebook, but I can say that could maybe relate to Facebook. So, like, kind of just to go with this, like, I guess you could say with Facebook, Instagram, heck, even YouTube. Like, do you think, not even just like digital platforms, but just also just any technology that is today, do you think it has made us dumber?
Have you read anything by Nicholas Carr? There's an article that he wrote in The Atlantic a number of years ago called Is Google Making Us Stupid? And I think that that's along the same line of what you're asking. Mm-hmm. Interesting article for you to find to really give you a more thorough answer to that. Is technology making us dumber? I think technology is changing the way we think, changing the way we know what we know. So we're talking epistemology there. How we know what we know is our epistemology. You mentioned before, Leonard, that your grandparents taught you things or knew things that were quite different than you can't really get now. That's, getting that kind of knowledge from our elders or from scholars or from giants in the field of literature, from really getting good sources, getting that kind of knowledge and then processing that knowledge and letting it move from knowledge to wisdom is what really happens and should happen. Why we think sometimes technology is making us dumber is because we're substituting information for knowledge. So just because we can find information doesn't mean that we're smarter. Because then what do we do with that information? And if all we're taught to do and all we do is we're good information hunters, we need information sometimes. We need a lot of information, and that's great if we can find the information. But unless it translates into knowledge, it will never translate into wisdom. Okay. And so it very well seems that we're getting dumber, that people know fewer and fewer things keeping up here. One good example of this is 25 years ago, I could rattle off 10, 15 phone numbers of friends and family members.
Yeah.
No problem. Now I'm lucky if I know 3. Because we have a 1-speed dial, and our brain is a fantastic machine. It's a fantastic organ, and our brain knows how to filter. And if our brain if we tell our brain we've got something kind of outboard gear, like an outboard brain gear to remember something, it doesn't take up the space to memorize it, and to keep it in there. And so it definitely seems like we're dumbing down. That's what it appears to. I'm hoping that there's a shift. I have hope in humanity, and I'm hoping that there's a shift where your generation or the generation after you wakes up and says, "Wait a second, what are we doing here? This is overkill. This is overkill." Yeah.
There is a cycle to things, like how it's like tough times make strong men, and then good times create weaker men, kind of thing. It's like a cycle throughout history like that. So there might be some type of a little bit of awakening of being like, hey, we might have to go back to some of the trade stuff, because trade's going to be very precious skill, and I think they're trying to look for that because people are going too much in the robotic engineering route right now. So
it's right.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, because sometimes when I'm asking my parents a question, they'll say, like, I don't know, I'll have to just Google it or stuff like that too. So now it's kind of bring up the saying, do you know it or you just Google know it? Especially now with like all the information now, you just have it. You just simply type it in too. You could probably find a do-it-yourself sort of project here. So I can definitely see what you mean too. So it's unfortunate, but at the same time too, you're also teaching grandma how to use her iPhone for the first time too. And I think sometimes you see it in those TV shows too, and it's just kind of like doing the hard pressing and stuff like that too. So you feel bad, but at the same time, it's like, come on, it's actually not as hard as you think it is. But for my question here, it kind of deals with technocracy. I'm hoping I pronounced it right, so I'm sorry if I said it wrong. But
technocracy.
Technocracy, okay. But I don't know if you touched on it a little bit too, but do you think there's going to be one in the near future, or is it going on right now, or just not aware of it, so to speak?
We are in the midst of a technocracy. I think we are. I have my students read a book called Technopoly, which is a book by Neil Postman that talks about the domination of technology over the human. And every time we choose a technocratic, or I should say a technological solution, without checking first to see if we can do it ourselves, we're paving the way for a deeper and deeper technocracy. What is a technocracy? Different people define that in different ways, and I think I'm not exactly sure the way that you're defining it. Are you defining it as like the robots taking over?
I think more. I know you mentioned about monopoly, so I think it's like still human, but they're using machines, and I think this kind of ties into like some of the stuff that happened like during COVID too, with like if certain people had dissenting sort of arguments, they got like banned from YouTube, so to speak. So I think it's more of information. It's more of like my way or the highway sort of thing, but it's still like controlled by humans, but they're just using the machines to either cancel or block certain information from getting out there, which kind of makes it shows both sides of the spectrum, so to speak, if that makes sense.
Definitely the algorithm that they have sometimes too with certain social media platforms.
I think it kind of feels like it's starting to happen now with, I don't know with Twitter, but everybody's kind of freaking out like it's Armageddon over there now, so I'm not sure. I don't know what's going to happen there, but for me it wouldn't matter either way, one way or the other, so we'll find something else. But
so much is happening with the press. So much has changed in the last 25 to 30 years with the press. I don't know. I have ambivalent feelings about that. Like, I'm not on Twitter. I purposely never put myself on Twitter. I believe in using appropriate media for appropriate situations. So this is appropriate. You don't live where I live. You want to do a podcast. We're having a conversation where we can see each other's faces and have some interesting conversation. I think that that's appropriate. It's not appropriate on Twitter, in my mind, to have a conversation a conversation where you're trying to persuade someone of something politically. People just kind of devolve into their own opinions, and they don't listen to each other, and they don't want to listen to each other, and they want to not just win the argument but destroy the other, you know. And so to me, it's like a media minefield. Why go there? Would you go to a minefield in Iraq or some other foreign country where you know that there's all mines hidden every 5 feet? I'm not. That's what I think Twitter is. It's a minefield, and it does not suit civil discourse. It does not suit the situation where people can actually have reasoned, interesting conversations. And we need to get that conversation back. Well, one of the things it teaches a book called Reclaiming Conversation by Sherry Turkle. And it sounds so basic. It's like, well, you're a communication teacher. Well, you're teaching conversation. Well, yeah, there's many, many people who have no clue how to converse because they just think, well, it's just talking and anything goes. No, a conversation, you listen to the other, you're curious, right? Then maybe you add something and you make meaning together in that conversation. You don't dominate that person. So there's just some of our social media it's not appropriate for every situation. You know, falling in love with someone is, you know, I mean, I guess there's as many ways to fall in love as there are people in the world. But you think, is it really, is that the best way to fall in love with someone back and forth on, you know, on Twitter or on Facebook or on TikTok? You know, you maybe get a little bit of information about them. They get a little about you. Maybe that's not the best example.
I know what you mean, though. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Something along those lines, yeah.
It makes sense. I mean, let's say this, like, I think us Americans know that TikTok is obviously, you know, has some Chinese influence on certain things. I mean, that's what rumor has it. Now, don't quote me. But the thing is, there actually has been videos showing when you go on those YouTube shorts or even, heck, whatever video shorts that you see on other social media platforms, you see that, you know, over in China, they're being educated on those TikToks. Like, you know, in educational achievements, what they're doing over here. But over here, we have distractions of, to be honest, be blunt with you, a girl that's half naked on a pole, or you got, you know, a guy doing a trick on one of his friends. Like, there's so many distractions here with our TikTok compared to what's over in China. So I feel like that goes back to that question before, has technology made us dumber? I think, again, going back to algorithm they have, who's ever controlling it, trying to make people weak, especially a nation, compared to another nation that wants to achieve more. So I think technology has its, you know, influence that way.
Well, I think you're right about China. And even more so, the Chinese have strict regulations on TikTok for their children. I don't know if you know that. But at a certain time every night, I don't know if it's 6 o'clock or 9 o'clock, it just goes off. There's no access to it. You know, the Chinese know something that we should know. We, I believe, live in the best country in the whole world. You know, we have the freedom of expression, and it's like it's an empty can that we're kicking down the road or something. We're abusing that beautiful freedom by thinking it means anything goes, instead of using our noggins, instead of using our brains to stop and think, not what's the easiest, but what is the best for my child. Not what's the easiest for me and my girlfriend or my boyfriend, but what's the best for us? What's the best for us? You know, and then make our decisions carefully and continually, and, you know, don't let this happen to us. I think we're letting it happen to us. So one of the best things I think that's happened in the last bunch of years is podcast. I think finally, one of the reasons why I almost never say no to a podcast, I've done a lot of podcasts this semester, but I almost never say no because it always involves conversation. Let's get people talking. Let's get people thinking. You know, let's work this out in our country instead of just being like sheep led astray.
Right.
I guess I get a little passionate about it.
Oh no, that's great. I mean, we have to be, especially the time that we're living in.
I have to say, I was kind of the same thing with the music podcast I did with Earl, which he didn't give me a shout out when he did his other episode. What the hell, Earl? So,
he didn't give you a shout out?
Not yet, but it's fine.
He will. He will. Oh, Earl. He's very generous that way.
Well, at first I thought he was talking about me, but it turned out he was talking about another drummer. So, no, he's good. Take his time. Take his time. I'm just teasing with him. So, I guess, what is it that makes humans so obsessed with just the technology too? And do you think there's other ways to kind of break that sort of obsession outside of conversation?
What is it that makes us so obsessed? You have to admit, technology is fascinating. Technology is amazing. The things that we can do with technology, it is more than interesting. It's shocking. And you guys, as millennials, may not feel as mesmerized or amazed as I do. But I grew up in college with a typewriter and whiteout and staying up all night typing all my friends' papers and typing my papers and starting 4 weeks ahead of time. And, because you had to go get the books and you have to do this. I mean, there's so much that is just amazing about technology. And I think that's one of the reasons why we can be obsessed with it. But I think a deeper reason is, we all have a longing to be known, to know and to be known. Many of us and most of us kind of cover that up with a mask, an invisible mask. We don't wear our heart on our sleeve and say, know me and ask me questions and, I want to belong in your community. We don't usually do that, but we long for that. We long to be a part of a closely knit group of family or friends. And as the country becomes more and more industrialized and post-industrialized with technology, and the community, the sense of community in many, many, many places is disappearing. Even in the churches, the sense of really being connected and a part of these 6 people or these 12 people. We started out this way talking about loneliness. It used to be that in the loneliness index showed that the elderly were the ones who were suffering. The elderly were the ones who were reporting. They're 85 and they're saying, I'm so lonely, I'm desperate, I have no one, I haven't seen anyone in days, I have no one to talk to. The loneliness index now is showing that, boomers like myself and Xers and millennials and Zs and children are reporting deep, deep loneliness and depression. So I don't want to make a direct, a causation, it's all because of our social media. There are many factors. But I think part of the obsession, Brian, to answer your question, is that we want this hunger and this longing to be filled. And if tech will do it, let's go with tech. It's a lot easier than investing your time and attention and energy and money and everything else into a community or a small group or a group of friends or a girlfriend or a wife, a husband. It seems a lot easier, a lot more expeditious. It's not. Caring, relationship, love, being known takes time, much effort, and it's messy. Human relationships are messy. And technology offers us frictionless interaction. Just, right? Swipe past, swipe past, swipe past. But with truth be told, husband and I are going to be married for 40 years next month or next year.
Congrats.
Thanks. We didn't get here. We didn't get here because it's just always been a bed of roses. We made a commitment to each other and we live out that commitment every single day. Some days are more difficult than others. Most days are not difficult. Most days are wonderful. But until we're willing to say, I'm committed to you people, or you friend, you messed up, I'm not going to leave you, I'll hang with you. Until we recognize that human life is imperfect, but it's what we've got, and we're ready to deal with the messiness, we're going to jump the fence and go towards tech every time. And that's where I think a lot of the obsession is coming from, Brian.
I tell you what, you made a really great point on what you're saying, because, you know, let's say this, that my grandfather and my grandmother's generation, they call them the greatest generation of all time because World War II and all that stuff, which there is real truth to that, because they were a generation, not a perfect generation, but a good generation that fought for good reasons. You know what I mean? That I by history standard, and even what they told me from the people that lived it, I know from what their feedback is, or even any of us seen and heard. But that, going back to what you were saying, Stephanie, is that knowledge being transferred down, and to know what the past is, and knowing what to go forward for the next generation, that's what's lacking. So I fear, to be honest with you, that, let's say this, there's always hope to be positive, to get backtrack onto where the human level needs to be back, you know, for good standard reasons. But I kind of fear for the Gen Z generation, because they're going off of what they see on social media, going off what they see of what, you know, technology, or seeing this as the norm now. I really think that they're going to change a lot of things that, honestly, I feel like the millennials, and even for your generation, is not going to agree on. So there's going to be a shift in certain things. So there might be either a change or agreement on things, or there could be a divide. There could be. So it's one of those options. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is that they're so fueled, and even my generation is so fueled on all these positive things that you see on social media, or so positive things on technology, that you're so consumed by it. It's like, oh, I want that. It's a little envy. It's a little jealousy that happens in the human mind. So that's where that loneliness comes from. That's where that, you know, ambition of like, oh, I want to do more because I feel like a bum or a loser of my life. That's how people are starting to feel, because they see the positive end, but they don't know what's going on in the back end of those people's lives. They could be depressed. They could be lonely. And to be honest with you, there actually has been a study where people that post a lot more, they're actually depressed people. They are. So I think that technology has made us lose our sense that way, and has gotten us off where we start to lose the reality and the common sense knowledge of where we stand on certain things.
I agree with you. I want to offer just a little word of hope there too. The Zs, I think you're right. The Gen Zs are on their way that way. To like a tech overload, and really not being grounded in general on the things that are true and good and right and pure and worthy of praise, shall we say. However, I'm old enough to know that those things are empty. They're empty. They do not satisfy. And so I trust and believe, and I'm hoping that that generation gets to feel that quickly. Because if they do, they will rise up and say, that doesn't satisfy. Look how empty it is. I've been doing this since I'm 10. It doesn't satisfy. And maybe they will kick back into a revolution, you know, a positive revolution towards humanity, towards relationship, towards reality and truth, rather than illusion and these sound bites, or, you know, just Snapchat bites, or whatever we want to call them. So I find a little hope in that, because I know that it's empty. It does not satisfy. Right. I don't know if that's any hope for you there, but
no, it does. I think people with common sense, and also the brains, will understand that should be a good advice, which you did give. And I guess you could say this on a positive note from that. What has technology helped us to improve humanity? Let's say on a positive note.
Well, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a doctor of philosophy, but there are so many new pharmaceuticals and procedures that have been making people's health lives so much better. Their mental health, their physical health after surgery. I mean, just that. I think, think back to the 1600s when doctors, and the 1700s when doctors, they only knew so much. And they thought, well, the person who was so sick here, they must have bad blood. Let's put these leeches on their arms and to suck the bad blood out. What a disgusting thing. like in our brains today, we think, how could knowledgeable doctors have continued that and watched people die and die and die from getting their blood sucked out because they thought it was poisoned blood, right? It's a lack of knowledge. They tried, they made mistakes, and then they let that practice go, thank God, into practices that were healthier and work better. And we're on that trajectory. That's what's happening now. More and more and more, we are benefiting from the research and development of medical researchers. So that's a positive thing. During COVID, I think it was a positive thing. I was able to conduct my college classes via Zoom. The students who were getting ready to graduate or coming in as freshmen or whatever grade they were, they didn't miss a semester because I was able to quickly turn and get my classes on Zoom and video them and lecture and discuss there. So, that's just two fields. And so also, I did some research about that time in COVID, and what I found with the focus groups that I conducted, my colleague and I conducted, were that 18 and 20-year-olds were miserable in a COVID classroom, in a Zoom classroom. And the kinds of things they said were, we feel so isolated. What about the nooks and crannies of our time with our friends and our peers here? We're not even getting, I feel like I'm a commuter and I'm not a commuter. I want my classroom back. They were adamant. So that taught us something too. That's a positive thing. That taught us that we need people. We don't need our little bubble of isolation, and we need to find ways to get out and break that bubble and get out into nature and get out into, letting our feet touch the sand and get caught in a storm sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
Feel our humanity.
Right. Thank God we know our humanity, like by common sense sometimes too, just like this. So, yeah.
Right.
I was just going to add in the doctor's practices where they actually amputate certain parts of your body after some points. So it was tragic too, but unfortunately, I think if you wanted to say it was like a bullet wound, for instance, since they didn't have the stuff, the hydrogen peroxide or whatever it was they needed to help clean those wounds.
I think they had whiskey. That's all they had.
They just had to make do. He hit her with a piece of wood and then a saw. So unfortunately, that was tragic. So, but like you said, thank God we got rid of those practices. So, was trying to build off everything too, because we talked for a good bit there. And
did you want to? I thought you wanted to ask me about my Within the Walls trilogy, my fiction work.
I guess sure.
Because that has to do with everything that you're asking. It has to do with all kinds of technology.
I was also thinking something along I don't know if we should say like the philosophy of like materialism, for instance, or whether it's like the materialistic things that we really want to hold. I don't know if that kind of ties into this too, or I guess.
You mean with technology or with my books?
With technology first off, and I guess anything you touched on in your books.
Okay, could you reframe the question for me, please? I didn't quite get that. I think Amazon was making a delivery to my front porch.
No. Okay. I guess
something about materialism, like the technology have to do with materialism.
Something like that, yeah. And I was going to say, like, do you think technology has made so much of a materialistic impact on people's lives, so to speak?
Gosh, there's a number of ways I could answer that. I think we've gone from being consumers of material goods, which kind of is an invention of the TV age. Radio and television, mass media kind of invented the consumer. Before that, we never talked about being consumers. Our culture talked about being citizens. We're citizens. We have a responsibility of citizenship and treating our neighbor fairly. But then radio and television came on and all the ads, and we started being taught that we're consumers. You can buy this, buy that, buy this, buy that, consume it, right? And so that's been going on a good 60, 80 years, close to that. But now it's almost like the materialism and the consumption is a foregone conclusion. People just think that that's the real life, like the more stuff I have. And I think the bigger problem, not saying that that's not a problem, but I think the bigger problem is that we've gone not just from citizenship to consumers, but now we're going from consumers to being commodities, like we're being the product. And, these big tech companies, big data and so on, are buying our information, and we're not getting any money out of it. We're just giving off our information to any app or any site that wants it so we can use it. And we're 2 steps away from citizenship. We're more like we're the product now, and so that is kind of scary. And I think when you have things like Hurricane Ian, like we had in South Florida last month, and the mudslides off of Italy today, and the loss of life, and the tsunami a few years ago in Sri Lanka, you see like all the goods, the material things just be washed away in a flash.
Right.
It's eye-opening. And we have access to that in our technology, seeing even more things through Google and through our YouTube and through news, global news. We see all that, but I think the bigger problem is that we're becoming the product.
Right. No, it is sad to see what happened down there with Hurricane Ian. So hopefully everyone's okay down there and everything like that. So, and
they're rebuilding. Rebuilding.
Pray for their safety and stuff too. So
yeah. Absolutely. And actually, I think I heard Lenny's cat earlier, kind of.
Yeah, cat's like literally right here. So.
Right.
Well, the reason I brought up Within the Walls trilogy before, it's because everything you're talking about is where I go in that fiction. It's set in 2071, so it's set in our future, and it's set like in a dystopic kind of America that has gone completely technocracy or technopoly, as you were talking about before. And the setting of it is that there's some great devastation that happens in the United States in the 2030s, right? And it was so devastating that everyone kind of had to go, like the government made everyone go home and live within their walls in isolation and not come out because of the ground and the air and everything was toxic. So in this fictionalized story, the prequel, we find that America is just become, the United States has become something else, just from like New York, New Jersey down to like South Carolina is the only ribbon of people who are still alive. There's only about 3 million people alive, and everyone communicates within the walls of their isolation and within the walls of their crania. And so the protagonist, Emilia, is a 29-year-old orphan who's at the top of her game in 2071, and she's creating virtual vacations because there's no more flights out of the country, because people don't even cook food anymore. They just let the government throw, like Provisio bars or protein bars into their doors. And so the story evolves over 3 books. The second one is Breaking the Silence. The third one is The Poet's Treasure. And it evolves into Emilia, I'm not going to tell you how, coming to an understanding that community, people in community socializing is where the answer lies. That has been taken away from her generation for 40 years. And that they're like, I don't know, they're not Generation Z, they're like Generation whatever, ABD, CXY, and they're at a loss. They're like almost deformed mentally because they don't understand how to even talk to another person. It's all the communication happens within the frame of the crania, but it's hopeful because she finds her way into some secret community and starts to learn or unlearn those things that she has learned by being isolated for all those years. So that's why I bring up the book. I mean, I finished publishing them in 2016, long before the the COVID-19 pandemic. And unfortunately, a couple of those things proved true.
You had a little prophetic vision. It actually says it's 2020s.
I'm hoping the rest.
Yeah, I mean, that honestly, that kind of goes with the question that you viewed before coming on the show. Like, do you think what we have now as a technology society, do you think it would either destroy humanity by control, or do you think it will destroy humanity by total destruction? And which one seems more realistic to you? I just added a little bit more of a question onto that.
I guess I have to say I don't think the world's going to be destroyed. I don't. I think the powers that play and the big problems that we have, climate and all kinds of things, I think they are pressing in upon us. But I think they will hurt us more as human beings than destroy us, more than destroy the earth.
So do you think control is more the more the possibility? It's kind of like similar to your story.
Perhaps, because my story is a cautionary tale. The government trying to make sure everyone's safe and okay, but they totally come in and they take control. And she ends up believing the government hook, line, and sinker, like that they're good and they have this whole new set of values. And it takes a long time for her to unlearn that. So, yeah, I guess you could say I think that would be more apt to happen than a total destruction. Anything could happen. I mean, I'm not going to prognosticate here. And God forbid, I hope it would never be destroyed. But I think that just like human beings are resilient, I think the earth is resilient. And, excuse me, I'm a person of faith. I really believe deeply that there's a maker of this earth, that there's a creator. And I believe he set this ball in motion and that he's got a plan and we're not going to be able to destroy it no matter how much we hurt it until the time where, his plan, whatever it is, come forth in the fullness. And until that time, I feel like part of my role is just reminding us to be human, because human is a gift. Human is a gift. And I think that the technology, the technopoly that we have now is trying to convince us, our current media are trying to convince us that somehow humans are like stinky, messy, imperfect, always going to mess up, always choose the computer because, the machine knows better, and I don't believe that. I believe there's a sacredness of life, there's human dignity, and it's up to us to protect that and speak it and live it and, rally for it rather than just kind of let big tech, like, did you know this? Did you know that, this is a little teeny bit off the subject, but did you know that Justin Rosenstein, have you heard that name? The guy who co-developed the like button for Facebook years ago?
The name sounds familiar.
Yeah, so he was the developer of the like button. He was told to create a mechanism in Facebook so that it gets them addicted. Like they can't get off of it. Mm-hmm. He created this like button. And 3 years later, after trying to undo it and tell them it wasn't ethical and whatnot, he finally quit. He said, we can't do this to people. We can't use our technology in ways that actually hurt us. We know our brains, how they work.
Right.
We know how addiction works. It's not ethical. But so we need more people like him who are willing to stand up and say, wait a second, there's something more important than money. There's something more important than me having a $35 million house in Laguna, Beach. There's something more important here. Yeah, I maybe would like a yacht, but there's something more important. There's the human race. There's families. There's neighbors. There's people.
Right.
So you guys having a show about technology, about the, blessing and curse of technology or the ups and downs of technology, the fact of technology, I think is a wonderful thing. Because then you're doing your little part to get people talking about important things. instead of just closing our eyes and closing our ears and not thinking about the ramifications. You're doing a good job getting people thinking.
Right, and that's the whole purpose for the show, and even just other subjects too, because even just the questions can get even deeper, even to other levels and stuff. There's so many branches of other subjects that even lead off to the questions that Brian and I are answering. So, but yeah, no, I personally, to be honest with you, I do not trust Mark Zuckerberg. I really don't. He's all for the money. I think he knows a lot more than what we know. And by common sense, I think we know what's going on behind the scenes, but people just tend to ignore it. And also, Elon Musk, he seems like a humble type of guy, but I wouldn't fully trust him either way, because sometimes people can play both sides. So it's like, everybody, it's money and power really comes down to it. They don't really care if it's destroying families. They don't really care if it's, destroying relationships. I mean, sometimes there's other plans that people do to try to destroy humanity than just with bombs and stuff.
That's right.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I see it that way too.
Mm-hmm.
I think I noticed more with in terms of politics, and this might vary between different people too, but regardless, it seems like it's so obsessive with like some of the materials that people need to have. It's like there's probably no doubt that they're hiding something behind our backs too, and it happens on both sides of the aisle. So I think that kind of ties into my earlier question too. So I guess Stephanie, what do you think about that too?
You're talking about politics?
A little bit, I guess. Have you ever discussed politics? And I guess, do you think there's some sort of game that they're playing with it too? Oop.
Sorry, I just kicked the tripod. You know what? I try to steer clear of politics, and not because I don't care. I, in the past, have written several articles years ago during presidential elections, and I find myself just getting too stirred up about it. So I've kind of geared away from that. I was never really big into politics, but I've geared away from talking about politics, and I spend my energy on one little life with just 24 hours in a day, and I spend my life and days talking about how we use our words as a communication professor, trying to teach students and help, walk alongside young people to help them understand that language is very, very important. The words we use are very, very important. I have a class called Civil Discourse and the Common Good that I teach. And I think it was probably in my mother's age, the 1950s and 60s, where people stopped teaching about civics. And hopefully it'll bounce back. We need it. Look what's happened when people aren't learning about civics. We need to learn how to use our language in ways that don't alienate people with whom we differ. Because where does it get us? Does it get any positive change? And so the thinking of, well, let's just, if someone doesn't hear me and they don't agree, let me just yell louder. That's not working. That's not working. So let's find ways to use language that works well and helps us get along, not just in our marriages and our neighborhoods, but in our nation and in the world. It's if more people would do it and be concerned about it, I think we could see a real turn in the political arena, Brian. But until people care about what they say and care about truth, nothing's going to change. People will keep using words and bastardizing language, using it in ways that hurt each other and that's manipulative. And I guess that's why I'm a communication professor. I love other things too. I had music in my career for many years and journalism and stuff, but communication really is my bread and butter because I think it's the thing we need most in the nation to turn this feels like a Titanic around,
Right.
Absolutely, yeah. I guess, Lenny, did you have any other ones you kind of want to throw out there, or?
Well, honestly, that's all the questions I have. But I tell you what, this has been very informative. It really has been. I think people that will watch this show, or hey, watching now, you never know. with us speaking when it gets released. I really think that people will take this as a learning thing. Because most talk shows they focus on one thing, and it kind of gets to well, I disagree with you this, I disagree with you that. Our talk show is more just like coming together, coming with a common ground kind of thing. Even though maybe all three of us might have a different point of view or something, or maybe two of us might have a different point of view than you do, or you do with us. But the thing is, this is what the communication needs to be like for hopefully the future, into the next generation. So,
yeah. I applaud you. I applaud you guys. And really, that's the only reason I mentioned my Within the Walls trilogy. You might want to put it on your show notes, because a lot of people don't go to college. They don't want to go to a university lecture, but maybe they'll read a story and see, all the things we're talking about here, and hold their attention like a book does.
Yeah.
I think I've noticed too that the debate field seems to be shifting somewhat in some ways, because in some of the more bigger philosophical sort of debates, it looks like it's not so much more like destroy the opposition. It's now at least having some sort of conversations, but it's at least still a little bit disagreeable here and there. Maybe people don't necessarily change other people's minds here and there, but it's at least different than what's been maybe just 10 years ago. That's at least what I'm seeing too, and that's more the hardline topics like meaning of life, why are we here, those sort of questions too. So
yeah, that's what I mean. I love the fact that there's more and more podcasts out there engaging people on many, many different issues, where you can really have a conversation. So I applaud you two young men. Thank you for having me on.
No worries. And this kind of wraps up the Up for Grabs show. This was episode 1. I guess, Stephanie, do you have any other shout outs or any last words you want to say before we close?
I don't think so. I shout out to my husband, Earl. I mean, he's the man. Yeah,
yeah, we need Earl to be our tech guy to help get us set up here too. So at least that worked out in the end too. So that's all good.
I was surprised you didn't ask me about drums, because I did write for Modern Drummer, and I hear you're a drummer.
Well, that was meant to be for a different episode, but I guess we can do that for actually our music podcast too. So we'll say that for another time too. All right. So if we're all good here, we're going to wrap it all up. All right. Everyone stay safe.
Take care. Good afternoon.
Bye-bye.